Wow, I really need to be making these videos as I finish boss fights because I feel like I keep finishing a boss in No More Heroes and then immediately just moving on to the next one. I don't really take the time to stop and immediately give my thoughts on each boss. After beating Destroyman, I had to go on to Holly Summers, and then I had to go on to Let's Shake, and then I had to go on to Harvey Mozowicz Volодарski. Like, okay, now I'm on Speedbuster, and I still have not put out a video talking about Destroyman. So I'm gonna take a little bit of time to like get caught up a little bit, talk a little bit more about like the things that happen in each boss fight because this is definitely one of the things I'm noticing as I'm going through this, as I'm going through like this list. I think I pretty much suggested as much in earlier videos, but No More Heroes is an extremely multi-layered story. It is extremely difficult to talk about all of the themes, the ideas, the subtle character moments, and the overall meaning of the story because there's a lot you can't actually talk about without knowing what comes later. For example, Travis's refusal to kill Shinobu makes a lot more sense after the Holly Summers fight. They don't really spend a lot of time elaborating on that, but it's made pretty clear that Travis has a problem with killing young, attractive female assassins. That's just the way it goes. It kind of ties into his thing, his relationship with Jean, his overall goal of fucking Sylvia. Like it's a really interesting aspect of his character, and I think that's the main thing that ties all of these fights together, regardless of what they're about, how the characters behave, Travis's relationship to them, how they treat him, what they talk about. No matter what happens, we get different insights into Travis's character. Like in this one for Destroyman, we sort of see, it's mostly about Destroyman himself. Actually, you don't get a lot of character insights into Travis himself. It's mostly just this is before I think the game really starts ramping up the whole really starts emphasizing Travis's depth as a character. It's mostly at this point purely about like showing off these new assassins and having Travis go up against them. In this case, you are up against Destroyman, who is holed up in a movie studio, an independent movie studio, where he apparently films his own indie superhero films. So Travis goes up to this guy, and you come across him out of uniform, right? He's a superhero, but he is in his secret identity, a mailman essentially. Really interestingly, you can sort of tell that like something is up with this guy from the start because of the way he acts and he talks, like the things he talks about. Like he speaks very softly, very politely, but he makes it very, very clear he dislikes a very certain kind of person. Like he apologizes for being late, but blames like these customers and their nonsense complaints. It essentially builds up to him transforming into a superhero in which his aggression becomes so much more overt. Like he becomes a lot more hostile and a lot more open about how he feels about the people around him. It's a really interesting take on like the whole superhero phenomenon. Like I think something that a lot of people don't really talk about, in which characters like Batman, like Spider-Man, take on these alter egos, these superheroes, to accomplish tasks that would not be practical or legal or even morally justified as ordinary civilians. Because they take on this superhero mantle, they feel they're able to do things that they would not be permitted to do as a civilian. So with Destroyman, once he becomes Destroyman, once he has the costume, his feelings of aggression, like his toxic behavior, his manipulative attitude, it becomes a lot more overt and obvious when he interacts with Travis. And it's not really something that Travis himself comments on. It's just something that kind of happens. It's an interesting character trait, and Destroyman is an interesting character. They of course reuse this concept in with New Destroyman and No More Heroes 2, which we will be talking about when that happens. long story short, he was split in half at the end, which sort of, which sort of, which sort of showcases, and he gets a cyborg half for each half of his body. So one side showcases the nice side of his personality, and the other is like super hostile and rude, but they're both still doing the same thing, right? Like in spite of how they act, in spite of how they behave, what they're doing is still morally unjustified. It is wrong, right? And you sort of see this play out several times throughout the fight, in which Destroyman constantly tries to influence Travis to make him believe that he's some noble soul who has some higher meaning in life. You sort of see this a couple of times. He asked Travis for favors. He asked him to turn around. He asked him for a handshake. He asked him to spare him. He does all of these things. But in the end, every single time he tries to fuck Travis over, right? He transforms. A laser beam comes at Travis. He apologizes and says it was a mistake. That's not obviously not true with what we see later. He asks for a handshake. He electrocutes Travis. And then attacks him, and then Travis gets the better of him, and then he tries one last time to get the better of him before finally being sliced in half. It's a really interesting sort of progression here. Destroyman essentially tries to manipulate Travis into essentially does everything in his power to manipulate Travis into believing that this is a whatever it takes, right? Whatever it takes to win, and in the end, it isn't enough. It isn't enough to overpower Travis, and in the end, he gets sliced in half for his trouble. So what does this mean for Travis specifically as a character? It just does. I think in this fight, the thing that really builds up Travis as a character is sort of a little bit more of his emphasis on why he's doing this. Like Destroyman asks him why are we doing this? Like, we're both assassins, right? Why do we have to kill each other? And Travis responds. Travis always consistently responds to these questions to prove who's best. But as we know, as we go further along with the game, that's not why he's doing this. Not really. You know what I mean? Like, Travis is deluding himself when he comes to, like, the reason he's going on this crazy adventure to become number one. It's not about being best. There's a lot more to it than that, but it's not something that he wants to bring himself to. He wants to admit to himself, right? Again, this becomes a lot more overt, like in later fights. I think Harvey Wolodarski is kind of a very overlooked example of this. I think that I would like to go a bit more in detail to, but as it stands, Destroyman is probably the closest thing to like a stereotypical what you would expect from a game like this. He doesn't respect Travis at all. He shits all over him. He cheats at every opportunity, and when all is said and done, Travis does get the better of him, and he does end up falling. The superhero isn't so super after all.